Hello, everyone. It's Joel once again. Some of you know me as Rise from the Ashes on X. The purpose of this video is to discuss the very heated but very important conversation about the Montreal Canadiens 2C situation. So, as you can see here, they have Nick Suzuki, who is a very established number one center at this point. Not a super elite centerman, but definitely a top 20 centerman in the NHL. Can he break open a game by himself like McDavid or McKinnon? Not necessarily, but any team in the league would be very happy to have Nick Suzuki as their number one C. But then you go down and you see, okay, right now they have Oliver Kapanen, a rookie, as their 2C. They have Jake Evans as their 3C. What we'll see is that ideally you probably want to move Oliver Kapanen down to 3C and Jake Evans down to the 4C. So you're still missing that 2C. So what we're going to focus on is which top six centermen have been acquired in the past 20 years. Okay, there's a very specific list of centermen that have been acquired that are top six caliber in the past 20 years. And what we'll notice is that no A-level prospects were ever traded in any of those transactions. Okay, so we're not looking at Hage, we're not looking at Jorovsky at all, no Reinbacher, no Fowler, those guys don't get moved in trades for top six centermen. Even in the Jack Eichel trade, that didn't happen. Then we'll look at how much did they cost to acquire those top six centermen, and what is the average age of a Stanley Cup team over the past 17 years, and we'll compare that to the Canadiens' average age at this time. So again, what we'll see is that their Stanley Cup window is still 2-3 years away. So first thing we'll look at, why do the Canadiens need a 2C? So as we can see right here, they don't have one. They have Oliver Kapanen as their second line centerman right now. And in the other video I made recently, I explained that the reason why Ivan Demidov is not getting more even strength minutes is because he's not playing with an established second line centerman. He's playing with a rookie centerman next to him. That's difficult for a coach to put out there for a regular shift, especially when you see that you have Nick Suzuki right there that you can put out there. So let's take a look at the average age of the Stanley Cup winners since 2008-2009. So here, the Penguins won the Cup back-to-back years, 2008, 2009, 2009, 2010. They had an average age of 26.6. So they had a young Sidney Crosby, a young Evgeny Malkin, Chris Letang, Marc-Andre Fleury, and they even had Jordan Staal at that time. Then, again, the Chicago Blackhawks, 26.6 years old. Then the Boston Bruins won at about 28 years old. Los Angeles Kings, 26.7, 27.7. As you can see, that in general, there is no number in the 25 range at all. So now let's look at the average age of the last 17 Cup winners, 27 and a half years old. That's the average age of the last 17 Stanley Cups. Now, this season, the best team in the league by far has an average age of 29 years old, the Colorado Avalanche. The Canadiens have an average age of 25 years old, 25 years and 3/4, 25.75. So they still are not out of this rebuild, not even close. So obviously, fans see the team, they see the glaring hole, they say, wow, imagine if they can get a 2C. How are they going to do it? The management is thinking, okay, look, we're looking for sustainable success. We want long-term success. We don't want to just win one cup and then be irrelevant and have to eventually retool or rebuild again. So in 2 years' time, when the average age will be about 27.75 for their team, okay, that will take them to about 2027, 2028. That's when they really will view their cup window opening. And if you can, go from 2027, 2028, and you tack on like another 3-4 years onto that, 5 years, their cup window could be until 2032, 2033 even. So that's what they're looking at. So how are they going to do it? Are they going to trade for a center? Are they going to try and sign a center? Are they going to be patient with what they have internally? Now let's see. Okay, so here were the top 3 centermen on every team that won the Stanley Cup going back to 2006. So as we'll see, each team had at least one clear-cut number 1 center, with the exception of the Boston Bruins, who had Krejci and Bergeron. They had kind of like at that time they were like two A centermen. Bergeron definitely evolved and became even better after that. Then you have, let's see here, the Blues. They had Ryan O'Reilly and Braden Shen. So they had 2 very good centers, both physically strong, knew how to play winning hockey, like playoff style players, quote unquote. Other than that, every other team had, except for the Blackhawks. Again, the Blackhawks was kind of tough for them to. They had Jonathan Toews, Then they always had some sort of mix of Brad Richards, Jesus, or here it was John Madden, but on those second lines they had Marian Hossa, they had Artemi Panarin. They were always. The Canadiens talk about how there are wingers that can drive lines. They were alluding to Panarin, Kucherov. They were alluding to potentially Ivan Demidov, but definitely Marian Hossa, who was a Selke candidate, was one of those players as well. So that's a bit of an outlier as well. But Jonathan Toews was arguably a top 2 centerman in those cup years. He really fell off after, but he was incredible. So the Canadiens have a 1C. They have one of these. And I argue that Oliver Kapanen could become one of these. Can he be in the realm of an Anton Lundell one day? Maybe not as good, but in the realm. I mean, he could be better than Lars Eller. He can be better than Nick Bonino. He can be better than Antoine Vermette. He could be better than Gourde. So he could definitely fill this a 3C role. The other thing that's very interesting is that all these 3Cs have a kind of a very specific archetype. They're typically pretty big, with the exception of Bozak and Gourde. But they're usually pretty big. They're gritty. They're good defensively. They're good on face-offs. They block shots. They hit. So it seems like there's a very specific type of player that teams need to win a Stanley Cup as your 3C. Okay? So it's 2-way, physical, face-off winning guys that you can put out in any situation. Okay? I think Oliver Kapanen could become that. Next, let's look at centers that have been traded. In the past 20 years. So top six centers have been traded in the past 20 years. There are specific examples, but you'll see that none of them were traded for anything crazy. So, I mean, Joe Thornton going back 20 years, what they got were 3 roster players for him. Okay, they got 3 roster players. They didn't get any futures. 3 roster players. Mike Richards, roster player. Wayne Simmons, Braden Shen, roster player, and a second round pick. They got established players. So in these 2 trades, they didn't look for futures. They were young, established players here in Simmons and Shen, but at the time, Braden Shen was considered an A prospect. So this is kind of an outlier here. Jack Johnson traded as part of the Jeff Carter trade. So this was 7 years after Jack Johnson was drafted. So he was already 25 at that time, and he wasn't looking like he was ever going to be that stud superstar number 1D that he was touted as. Jordan Staal, again, roster player. Brandon Sutter. Brian Dumoulin was not, if I'm not mistaken, he was not yet in the NHL. Anyway, Brian Dumoulin was very established, became a very good player. He's big, rangy defenseman. So teams could see what he was going to become. And they also got a first in that Jordan Staal trade. So Jordan Staal, he's never really been a top 6 centerman, but you're looking at he was an elite 3C for many years. Still very successful even 13 years after that trade happened. St. Louis, not really a center, but a responsible player nonetheless. But again, roster player, very important. Ryan Kessler. So he was definitely a top 6 player at this time. They got Nick Bonino, who was a roster player, Lucas Pizza, who had top 4 potential at that time, and a first round pick, which became Jared McCann. So again, no real A prospects that are being traded in these. No one like Michael Hage, no one like Alexander Zhuravsky, no one like David Reinbacher. Ryan Johansson for Seth Jones. This was a semi-established player for a semi-established player hockey trade. So that doesn't seem like it will apply to the Canadiens. Eric Staal was still very solid, still was productive at this time. They got a roster player for him and a couple of picks. Derek Brassard. So Derek Brassard had just was relatively successful with the New York Rangers. Was producing points at that time. He was considered a low-end 2C probably at that time. And they got Mika Zibanejad, who was he was an A prospect for a few years, and he was sort of up and down. And Jeff Gorton pounced on that. They got Zibanejad and a second-round pick for Brassard. Now, the Senators actually had a deep playoff run that year, got to the Eastern Conference Finals, but in hindsight, that was a bad trade for them. Matt Duchene in 2017, they got this was a prospect heavy trade. So Avalanche traded Duchene. They were looking to change their core. Duchene needed to get out of there, so they just and Avalanche were looking rebuild. So they got Girard, who was not yet in the NHL. They got Kamenev, who had some top 6 potential and ended up busting. Shane Bowers was a first round pick. He was maybe going to be like a 3C. Didn't work out. And a first round pick and a second round pick. So because they weren't giving an actual roster player at that time, they were paying heavy in futures. Let's go to 2018. Paul Stastny traded from the Blues to the Jets. So the Blues, which were a competitive team at that time, they realized they were not going to make the playoffs, and they traded Stastny. They got Eric Foley and a first round pick. So this was a UFA center that they traded and got a first round pick for him. but he was still a top six center at that time. Then Ryan O'Reilly. So Ryan O'Reilly traded from the Sabres to the Blues. They got Berglund, which was a roster player, Tage Thompson, which was not considered an A prospect at that time. He was probably considered like a B or a B plus prospect at that time. Vladimir Sobotka, which was a solid bottom six roster player, a versatile player, and a first round pick and a second pick. So heavy price to pay because they mixed roster players and futures. But that won the Blues the Stanley Cup. So um, this could be a type of trade actually that the Canadiens might be able to pull off for Tage Thompson, ironically. JT Miller. So JT Miller was traded to the Canucks for Marek Mazanec, which was he was maybe like a 1B starter potential at that time, a first round pick that became William Eklund. So that was pretty good trade. But overall, I think everyone would consider that to be a steal for the Canucks. Then Kadri, this was the Leafs had playoff failure and they blamed it on Kadri, and they said, well, let's try and get some more depth in our roster and trade Kadri to do that. So they got Barry, who was like a basically a offensive defenseman, not reliable defensively, not physical at all. They got Kerfoot, who was a solid middle six player basically. So they said, okay, well, listen, we want to play an up-tempo style of hockey, analytically driven hockey. Let's get Barry. We'll have the puck more. We'll get Kerfoot, and so it's like, not as good as Kadri, but we'll still have a middle six player because Matt Kadri is basically playing 3C for them. Again, two roster players. That's what it took to get Kadri. And also his value was diminished. It shouldn't have been, but I guess teams thought he was maybe would have been a problem in their room. I'm not sure. Trocheck. So this is a very interesting one because he was not really established as a top six center yet, but everyone knew that he was a gritty, versatile player with some skill. And so they got Eric Holla, which was an established, semi-established player, tons of speed at that time. Lucas Wallmark, who had solid NHL potential at the time. Chase Prisky, who was, I think, probably like a B minus prospect, and Eetu Luostarinen, who I think, I'm not sure if he was the key to the trade from the Panthers' point of view, but he ended up obviously being the best player in that deal. So that was, again, you got one roster player and three solid, decent prospects. Jack Eichel. So this is a huge trade. Alex Tuch, which is a huge piece. Peyton Krebs, who was a considered probably like a B plus prospect at that time. The Achilles injury really set him back. But Alex Tuch was a big roster piece to give up. And the Golden Knights took a calculated gamble on Jack Eichel. That was a very genius move by the Vegas Golden Knights. But you can't really blame the Sabres for taking that deal, getting a hometown guy in Tuch, and Krebs is a solid prospect, so they made decent out of a bad situation there with Eichel. Claude Giroux, again, they got a roster player, an Owen Tippett, and he was like an A minus prospect. But again, I think a lot of people had concerns about the hockey sense, but the athleticism and the skill was there. So pretty good move for the Flyers. For an aging Giroux, that's a solid trade. Bo Horvat, this is an absolute steal for the Islanders. The Canucks, they got Ratty, who had middle six center potential, Beauvillier, who was really a cap dump at the time, and the first round pick that they turned into Hronek. So it was kind of a creative trade. They got a top 4D and a middle six center for Bo Horvat, but Horvat's really good. Dubois, that was a steal by the Jets, but again, you got 3 roster players and a second round pick for Dubois. So um, I think the Jets should be happy that the Canadiens were kind of involved in that negotiation process for probably boosting his value. And then the Lindholm trade, that was he was not playing that well, and they I guess they lowered his value to get him, and he hasn't been that good since. But um, this is a bit of an outlier, but really a trade deadline move. And now Hurdle again. Edstrom was considered, I think, to be like a B plus to A minus prospect. Solid middle six potential. He's like an Oliver Kapanen archetype. So it was an Atu Rati. These are valuable players that teams covet, and a first round pick. So, what 3C? What 2Cs are potentially available? So Tage Thompson, not in a great situation. But will the Sabres want to do that again and trade help out another team again? I'm not sure about that. But he's 28. I think the Sabres could be interested in some of the Canadiens prospects like Zhuravsky, Hage, Reinbacher, Engstrom. But to do a Tage Thompson trade, that's what they would have to do. They would have to probably include one of those guys plus a roster player. So someone probably like a Kapanen, even though the Canadiens would probably like to keep him as their 3C. Zaka, this would be an interesting option as a 2C until Hage matures. And Pedersen, I know he's very controversial, but I know that I'm confident that if he were to come to the Canadiens, he'd be an excellent 2C for them. And the Canucks are probably going to go rebuild, probably because of Quinn Hughes not really wanting to be there anymore. So he could probably be had. So the last thing I want to talk about is Hage. Should they just wait for Michael Hage then? Because it's not looking like there's that many centers available out there. Those 3 that I mentioned, Zaka, Thompson, and Pedersen, are really the only 3 that are semi-realistic. And they're not really super ideal either. But as we saw in cup-winning teams, you don't always need an elite 2C, but you need to have an excellent 1C, like a superstar 1C, or 2 low-end 1Cs like Shen and O'Reilly were, or Bergeron, Krejci were. I think that they at this point, you try and go get someone like an Eric Halla, and you plug a hole for this season, and you wait for Hage. He's excellent in transition. Is he the best at winning battles? Not necessarily, but he's improved his strength. He's improved his details at protecting the middle of the ice, and they're in no rush. They still have a good 2 years before their cup window opens in 2027, 2028. So they can be patient, and they will be patient. They've proven that they're going to be patient. So as Canadiens fans, you just need to enjoy the process, relax a little, and be thankful that the Canadiens have A prospects coming up. They have tons of options. So let's see what happens. let's be patient.